I now call on none other than Alan Jones to share a little bit of the sporting prowess of the Tongan peoples.
Thank you, Louise. Your Majesties, members of the Royal Party and the Royal Entourage, Consul General of the Kingdom of Tonga, very distinguished senior statesmen of our country, Mr. and Mrs. Waterhouse, what an achievement. 40 years of extraordinary contribution to this kingdom, and we salute you today, we really do. And of course to our Consul, Louise. It is my pleasure to be able to speak to you today about one or two aspects of the contribution. I think many people have identified the contribution of the Tongan community to the Australian way of life in so many fields, and I'll say something in a moment about that in terms of sport, but it is true that this is an extraordinary story, basically the Tongan story of a community of 748 square kilometres, a population of about 103,000, 177 islands in the kingdom, and yet from that, in the world of sport, extraordinary achievements have been secured. Indeed, Louise has already alluded to some of them, but in terms of Australian representation, many of your young people of Tongan heritage have represented some of the finest talents ever to wear green and gold. Willie Offahangawi, who can ever forget his contributions? Israel Folau, now arguably one of the greatest rugby players in the world. Tatafa Paula now, one of our hookers who'll go to the World Cup. The Fainga twins, I was only speaking to Anthony yesterday, wonderful young men, both of whom have played for Australia and for Queensland. Wycliffe Palu, Sekope Kipu, Daniel Tupou, who is the magnificent winger on the minor premiership rugby league side, the Sydney Roosters. Sam Moa, a forward with the Sydney Roosters. Michael Jennings, a brilliant Australian rugby league and Sydney Roosters centre. The young Willie Hopoati, the Parramatta winger. And of course on the women's side, Monia Gerard, now the world champion, a world champion netballer, and now as well representing Australia in the rugby sevens. Some of those people are here today. The achievements are extraordinary. Your Majesty, I should just say to you that it's not all good news for us, because while we've only played you 4 times in rugby, as Sir Nicholas Shahady would recall, one of our great Australian rugby players and captain of Australia, there was that rather fateful day at Ballymore in 1973. And it's generally not remembered. I suppose it's convenient for Australians not to remember. But we were hammered, is the word we use in Australia. We were hammered. And Tonga beat us 16-11. Now, the significance of the triumph by Tonga, one of only 4 tests that unfortunately we played against you, was that this was a very, very strong and distinguished Australian side. Those of you who like your rugby, can I just read you the team? Australia played with Arthur McGill at fullback, John Cole and Owen Stevens on the wings, Rex Lestrange and Trevor Stegman in the centres, Jeff Richardson at 5'8", Eric Tyndall at half, Ronnie Graham, Chris Carberry and Jake Howard in the front row, Stuart Gregory and Garrett Fay, as good as they've ever been in the second row, and Dick Cox, Peter Sullivan and the great Mark Lone in the back row. And we lost. We lost. We lost. And the score was 16-11. Which brings me to a point, Your Majesty, that I'd like to make, because I know that present with us today is the Tongan Minister for Sport. And I know that there is a proposal afoot for, indeed you have in fact started this, it's the first inception of a Tongan Institute of Sport. I wear a couple of hats there. I'm a former chairman, deputy chairman of the Australian Sports Commission, and currently with the New South Wales Institute of Sport. And I have to say, and I think representatives of Australian rugby may well be here today, but one of the serious points that I would like to make is that I think too often we take your talent and we don't actually give much back. And I think if we're going to grow sport in the Pacific Islands and embellish and strengthen Australian sport through the kind of distinguished players I've talked about here, we have an obligation to go back to Tonga, and yes, the dirty word is money, but with money to finance the growth of sport in your kingdom. And I hope that this commemoration and celebration today will inject into the sporting community a sense of responsibility to acknowledge the debt we owe to your kingdom for sharing with us some of the greatest players who've ever played for Australia. And indeed, it's fair to say, as a Rugby World Cup begins, I wonder how strong the Tongan side would be if those people of Tongan heritage were allowed to represent Tonga. So it's a very, very proud tradition, and I know that the Institute of Sport, Minister, wherever you are, I hope that you'll feel free to take advantage of whatever structural knowledge we have, whatever administrative knowledge we have, but more importantly, I know you're seeking from us an injection of coaching and administrative expertise, which I believe, in the light of what we have shared with you in the past and what we've done with your players representing us, I think we're obligated to do that. And I think we need both administrative and coaching structures, and we need financial support to see that the kingdom grows into the sporting power that it is, but unfortunately it doesn't get the benefit of that. And I think many people here don't understand that. If, as I said, Tonga were able to play with Indigenous Tongans in international sport, particularly our game of rugby, then they would be a powerhouse in the world. So can I say to you, on behalf of the New South Wales Institute of Sport and the Australian Sports Commission, we will lend to you whatever you need by way of administrative knowledge, coaching capacity, to see that I know I'm being presumptuous, he's way down the back there, but I'm speaking for him as well, and I'm sure he shares those views, because it is an obligation we have in the light of the tremendous contribution you've made to our history. So may I, on behalf of Australian sports people, salute you, salute the Kingdom, and in doing that, salute the Honorary Consul General and Mrs. Waterhouse, because you have built this bridge between the Kingdom and Australia. We are deeply in your debt for that. It is an extraordinary and significant milestone, 40 years of diplomatic service. And Mr. and Mrs. Waterhouse, congratulations. And to you too, Louise, it's 20 years that you've been the Honorary Consul as well. These are wonderful and stellar achievements, and you are then, as a result of this representation, very much part of the fabric of Australian life, but from my perspective today, very much part of the fabric of Australian sporting life. Thank you for what you've given us. Thank you for what you've shared with us. Thank you for honouring us today with your presence here, and long may this strong and fruitful engagement between our two countries continue. Thank you for sharing your time with us.